So a friend of mine was having issues with some remanufactured ammunition for his 45, where he was having some failure loads on a few of the rounds. He had found a real good deal online. Ammunition for him was kind of tough to come across, and he doesn't reload on his own. So he asked me to take a look at them. I don't load 45 on a regular basis right now, but I figured I'd take a look at them, maybe look at some of the specs. So one of the first things that I did was I took a few of the rounds that he provided to me and took some measurements on most reloads. Most reloaders know about the SAMI specs that you can get off online, and we watch these pretty closely on the loads that we put together. You use basic measuring material, measuring equipment, measuring tools to make sure that your end product is fitting within the spec of the ammunition or the cartridge, and also provided our chamber measurements for various loads. You can download those all from online. But some of the things that I looked at, the cartridge was in spec according to SAMI, but sometimes they don't cycle in your firearm. There are things on the firearm you can look at if it's a new purchase firearm or one that has never been to a gun shop. Sometimes there's a little polishing or magazine attention that could help with this as well. So this isn't a one stop fits all. He was having problems with the cartridges, as he said, catching. The case mouth seemed to be catching on the barrel as it was going into the chamber. So one of the easiest things that we can do is buy a calibrated cartridge gauge or a case gauge, and these are pretty simple. The way that they work is you take your finished cartridge, you drop it. Well, I'll show you in this one. You drop it into the case gauge, and the cartridge should fall right into the gauge, and you can easily see that it fits within the dimensions. But the particular cartridges that he provided to me, for some reason, one or more of the dimensions are not allowing it to free fall. Now, another way to do this is if you have the barrel of the gun that you're going to be shooting it out of, you can do what's called a plunk test and drop those cartridges right into the chamber, and they should fall right in. You shouldn't have to force them at all. And he was telling me that that wasn't happening with these particular cartridges. So without the chamber, this is and many manufacturers make them, Hornady, Lee, you can get them from just about any type of manufacturer. But one of the and most of the materials that I use, the equipment that I use is Hornady. I have a Hornady L&L AP auto plant. But one of the really neat pieces of equipment or tools that we can use for cartridges to finish them off is called a Lee Carbide factory crimp die. And this die does have lock and load bushing. The bushing that's on it right here doesn't come with the die. It's specialized to make it just a little easier and quicker to insert into my particular press. I'll show you that in a little bit. But one of the neat things about this Lee factory crimp die, and this is the Carbide factory crimp die, is that it does more than just a crimp. You can read up a little bit on roll crimping versus taper crimping, and with most straight wall cartridges, they headspace against the chamber with the case mouth. So you don't really want to roll crimp those. You want to taper crimp them, where it just kind of squeezes the whole top of the cartridge to give it a slight taper. They look straight walled, but they're not perfectly straight. There is a slight taper. What this particular die does is a couple of things. It resizes the entire case as it goes into the die. It will resize the entire case. It will taper crimp the top of the cartridge and impress a taper ring whether or not you have a groove already in your bullet. And as you remove the case again, it does resize the cartridge. It was really neat. Until I bought this particular one and started reading at it, I didn't realize the detail. I figured it was just a really nice taper crimp die. So if you've never actually looked at one or looked into the Lee Precision taper crimp or factory crimp die, they do make a taper crimp that is not the full factory crimp. It only tapers at the top. This is the factory crimp die that does the full resizing. So I've already gone through and set up this die in my press. I've cleaned it, I've lubricated it, I've put it back together, I've set it in my die bushing, and I've set it for these cartridges. The first cartridge that I showed that plunked and dropped right into the case gauge has already been run through this die. But I wanted to show you how easily it is. They've already been hit with one shot and let it dry, so everything's lubricated. But pretty simply, if you've got one or two that you think you're buying remanufactured ammunition, I would never recommend that you totally disassemble and try to reassemble those same parts without really knowing what you're doing and understanding the process. But I just wanted to show what this little die is able to do for this process and getting dimensions back up to par. So very simple little process to run through the press once it's in there, and voila. So I don't know if this was possibly a bulge on the lower portion of the cases, or it was a little too much flare, which is one thing that I was suspecting. It was within dimension, but if that flare is a bit harsh, a bit more than's needed, and if you look at these, you really can't see anything with the naked eye. You may think that you see a bit more shadow on the two to the left, and possibly you do, but any little small imperfection, the human eye is not necessarily going to be able to tell and measure to the calibration that we'd need. It feels like something's hanging up in the gauge. Okay, there we go. Might have just been a little piece of debris or something that was hanging it up. So so that's three that have been running through, and we'll take the last cartridge and just run it up into the die. And voila. So really nice product. It's the first of these factory crimp dies by Lee that I picked up, and I reload several other pistol calibers, so I'll probably be picking a few more of these dies up for my other calibers as well. This is a really neat Really neat tool. It does not do your decapping for you or your initial sizing, which you probably still need to do. It does not seat bullets for you. It does not bell your mouth. But if you do have your standard set of dies that you're going to be using to process your brass, you clean your brass, you prime your brass, get it loaded, powder, get your projectile set. Once everything is set, this is a really neat finishing die to use. So again, this is the Lee Carbide factory crimp die, and strongly suggest it.